You mentioned last week that the handover of transition documents will happen on Thursday, May 25, right? According to the schedule.
Yeah.
Give us an update on the transition process and how far all the committees have gone.
Well, we are doing very well. We are doing very well. All the committees are working assiduously. You know, this is the first time we are having a very structured transition, which is backed up by an executive order number 14, which was signed by President Muhammadu Buhari, and asked me to chair that committee, which is a 24-man committee. And on it, we have the representation of the president-elect. Ahmed Bola Tinubu has 2 representatives on the Transition Council. And they've been working with us. As a matter of fact, they are embedded in some of the strategic committees that we have. One of them is serving on the Security Facilities and Intelligence Committee. The other one is serving on the Transition Documents Committee. And all the committees are working very well. I chair one of the committees, which is the Inauguration Committee. And the President-elect has his representation in the 13 subcommittees of the Inauguration Committee. So we are working hand in gloves, and I believe that they are quite happy and satisfied with the level of preparations. They are also satisfied with the contents of the transition documents, which will be handed over to the incoming president, the President-elect Senator Bola Tinubu, on Thursday, the 25th. We are ready to go. And that day also, he will be decorated with his national honor of GCFR. His vice would equally be decorated with the national honor of GCON. I have right in front of me here their certificates which have been endorsed by President Muhammadu Buhari. So we are set to go in all the events of the that we have outlined at the press conference. I can assure you that we are going to have a spectacular, seamless transition of power.
We're talking about the press conference. You specifically called for what you called a further specific legislation on presidential transition in Nigeria, as it is in other leading democratic nations. What will the content look like, and have you started pushing for it?
We have. I already have a draft that I would ask Mr. President to send to the National Assembly as an executive bill. That will be considered by the 10th Assembly. I can tell you that because prior to this time, I had set up a transition tax team which undertook working visits to 2 different countries. A team went to the United States, which has had a legislation, a transition act from 1963. Another team went to Kenya to understudy what they have put in place from the year 2020, I think. They have a legislation too that governs presidential transition. This study to us has been very rewarding. We have taken critical lessons from this study to us because their transition committees operate differently. And we have married it with our own home experience, and we have developed a proposed bill that, like I said, I will get Mr. President to pass it to the National Assembly, and the 10th Assembly will consider that. We need a structured transition process. In the States, it can be chaotic, particularly when you have an opposition party taking over from a ruling party. It can be chaotic. It ought not to be so. We are civilized people. We've been architects and practitioners of democracy in this country. We should learn to do things orderly. And I feel very satisfied and gratified that under my watch, I've been able to create a transition framework, which we are working with now as an executive order, but eventually it will become an act of the parliament.
In the final days of President Buhari, a lot of people have been reviewing, his administration's performance. And I know that you chaired the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, overseeing and coordinating the, multi-sectoral intergovernmental efforts to contain the spread of the virus. You might not really be a judge in that regard as to how you have fared. I just want to give you a few minutes to talk to Nigerians about how you think this administration dealt with that that season, which is now being talked about as perhaps one of the highlights of the outgoing administration?
Truly, I can say that our national response was a remarkable response, considering the very, very weak health infrastructure we have in this country. We came up with a model. We were the first country to close down our borders. We did very aggressive things. The beauty about it is that Nigerians were united about the response. I remember at different times I had to deal with NIREC, which is the Interreligious Council of Nigeria, because some of the lockdowns were going to affect places of worship. At times I had to deal with the National Council of Traditional Rulers because we wanted the buy-in of the leaders in the local community so that when we speak, they will re-echo our voices in the rural communities so that adherence and obedience to some of the guidelines that we had put in place would not be a burden on the people. We also worked in unison with the corporate world. You remember our engagement with COVID, where they came in and provided isolation facilities, provided resources for the procurement of PPEs, test kits, and also our intervention with the global community through the platform of the United Nations Basket Fund. So our response has been adjudged to be one of the best globally, not nationally or on the African continent, one of the best. It has become a reference point because of the resilience of Nigerians and the determination of Nigerians to ensure that we were not ravaged as predicted by the global community by the COVID-19 experience. And on even the economic front, most countries went into recession. But believe you me, after 2 quarters, Nigeria exited recession. Up till today, there are nations of the world that are still suffering and they are still in recession. They have not been able to exit as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which later was exacerbated by the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, which disrupted supply chains. But I can say with a sense of satisfaction that as a people, we stood up to the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we resolved as a people that we were going to do whatever it was going to cost us as a people and as a nation to ensure that we provided a safety net around our communities and around our families. Unfortunately, we lost a few people in direct relation to our population. The world globally lost about 6.6 million people, while in Nigeria, the figure still stands at about 3,155, which I believe one soul loss as a result of COVID-19 is regrettable, but I think we've been able to put up a response that has stood the test of time. COVID-19 has been degraded in terms of being a global health challenge by the WHO.
Your Excellency, perhaps we'll find time post-inauguration to sit down with you and hear your view about this after this administration. But I must say a big thank you. Finally, as we leave in just 1 minute, you have spoken about how significant, how historic May 29 is, how proud Nigerians must be. I just wanted to speak to Nigerians who are watching right now about the coming days and why they must be on board.
Nigerians are very hopeful people. I would want to appeal to us as a people and as a country that the world is watching us, and we've been given an opportunity to demonstrate that Nigerian spirit, the spirit of excellence, the spirit of perseverance, and the spirit that tells us that we are on a trajectory of growth, and the future should be a hopeful one. My appeal is that we should look into the future. The mantra of the incoming president is renewed hope. That should keep us alive. That should give us all the impetus of striving to develop our nation and keep our nation united. Thank you.
We're counting on that. Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman of the Presidential Transition Council, Boss Mustapha, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.